The boy hiding beneath the stainless steel supply table wasn't crying. That frightened Evelyn Hart more than tears would have. Children cried when they believed someone might come. This one sat perfectly still, one scraped hand clamped over his mouth, listening to the footsteps outside the clinic door. Evie had been reaching for her coat after a 14-hour shift when she heard the cabinet move. At first, she blamed the building. The Brooklyn clinic was old enough to groan without permission. Then she saw two polished black shoes beneath the table, and a pair of dark eyes far too calm for a 7-year-old. "Please don't turn on the lights." His whisper barely reached her. Evie lowered herself slowly, keeping both hands where he could see them. His white dress shirt was torn at one shoulder. A red mark circled his wrist, and rainwater dripped from his hair onto the tile. Expensive clothes. No yakit. No adult. Every instinct she had sharpened at once. "Are you hurt?" The boy shook his head, then hesitated. "Not bad." Outside, a car door slammed. A man's voice carried through the rain. "Check the alley again." The child's face emptied of color. "They're looking for me." Evie didn't ask who. Not yet. She crossed the room, turned off the reception lights, locked the deadbolt, and pulled the privacy shade over the glass. Her pulse was loud, but her hands remained steady. Panic was contagious. So was calm. She guided him into the pediatric exam room and closed the door without letting it click. "What's your name?" He studied her blue scrubs, her tired eyes, then the badge clipped to her pocket. "Nico. I'm Evie." She took a juice box from the staff refrigerator and placed it beside him. "Any allergies?" Nico accepted it with both hands. "Carrots. And people who lie." Despite the footsteps moving past the front windows, a surprised laugh escaped her. "Good. I only have apple juice and unresolved personal problems." His mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close enough to matter. Evie cleaned the scrape on his palm while he watched the door. She didn't ask him to be brave. Adults said that when they wanted children to make fear more convenient. Instead, she wrapped the bandage gently. "You can be scared. You just have to keep breathing while you are." Nico's shoulders loosened by half an inch. Then Evie noticed the broken device hanging from his belt. It looked like a GPS tracker, but the casing had been opened cleanly, the wires cut with precision. Whoever had taken him hadn't acted impulsively. They had known exactly what security he carried. A shadow paused outside the frosted glass. Evie covered Nico with her body before she could think about it. The shadow remained for 3 long seconds, then moved away. Nico reached inside his pocket and produced a phone with a cracked screen. They missed this. The battery showed 3%. The contact list contained one number. "Dad." Evie opened the message window. "What should I tell him?" Nico looked at her hand, then placed his smaller one inside it. "Tell him I'm safe." She photographed only their joined hands, careful not to reveal his face or the room around them. Then she typed, "Your son is safe. Don't call. They're outside." The message delivered. 1 second passed, then 2. A reply appeared as footsteps returned to the clinic door. "Who are you?" Roman DeLuca read the message twice before allowing himself to breathe. Around him, 12 screens glowed with traffic feeds, building cameras, and maps marked with red circles. Men moved through the command room with controlled urgency, but the second the photograph appeared on his phone, every sound seemed to pull away. Nico's hand, small, alive, wrapped around the fingers of a woman Roman had never seen. "Trace it," Luca Moretti ordered from across the table. Roman lifted one hand. The room stopped. No calls. No signal spike. His voice remained low, but the fear beneath it sharpened every word. Luca stepped closer and studied the image. She hid his face. Roman had noticed that too. She had also angled the camera away from windows, signs, and reflective surfaces. No panique. No careless details. Whoever she was, she understood danger. He typed with one thumb. "Who are you?" Across Brooklyn, Evie watched the 3 words appear while footsteps slowed outside the clinic. Nico's fingers tightened around hers. She turned the phone face down and guided him behind the exam table. "Stay low. No matter what you hear. Are you leaving?" His voice cracked for the first time. Evie crouched in front of him. No, I'm making sure they don't come in. A knock struck the front door. Not frantic, not official. 3 deliberate taps. Back in Manhattan, Roman's technical team narrowed the signal to a 6-block radius before the phone went quiet. We have a location window, Luca reported. How many men? All of them. Luca glanced toward the line of armed security waiting beyond the glass. You may want to leave a few at the house. Roman slid into his coat. The house isn't what I'm trying to find. He sent another message before moving. I'm coming. Don't open the door for anyone. The reply arrived almost immediately. That was also my plan. Roman stared at the screen for 1 beat longer than necessary. Fear still pressed against his ribs, but something unexpected moved beside it. Respect. No one spoke to him that way unless they were reckless, powerful, or unimpressed. He had no idea which category she belonged to. At the clinic, the knocking came again. Police, a man called through the glass. We receive a report about a missing child. Evie looked toward the darkened reception desk. No flashing lights outside. No dispatcher had called. More importantly, the man had used the wrong precinct number when he identified himself. Nico shook his head before she could ask. That's not them. Evie picked up the clinic's fire extinguisher and motioned toward the rear hallway. Then we're not staying to introduce ourselves. The deadbolt rattled once. Then harder. A second man moved past the frosted window. Ma'am, open the door. Evie backed toward Nico, keeping her voice steady. You'll need a warrant. Silence followed. For half a second, she hoped the bluff had worked. Then something metallic scraped against the lock. Nico looked up at her, his face pale. They have a key. The lock turned a fraction before Evie shoved the medicine card against the door. Metal groaned. Nico flinched, but she caught his gaze and pointed toward the rear hallway. Move now. Quiet feet. He obeyed without argument. Behind them, the men at the entrance stopped pretending to be police. The first impact rattled the glass. Evie pushed Nico through the laundry room, past stacked linens and humming dryers, then yanked open a service door that led into the neighboring pharmacy's storage corridor. Which way? Nico whispered, away from the people with keys. A second crash sounded behind them. Evie grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and kept moving. They reached the alley just as the pharmacy lights flickered on. Rainwater shone beneath the security lamps. A tall man stepped from between 2 black SUVs, his dark coat open over a charcoal suit. Several others spread behind him with the disciplined silence of people who never needed to announce danger. Evie pulled Nico behind her and raised the extinguisher. The stranger stopped. His face was sharper than photographs could have captured, controlled to the point of severity. Yet his eyes were fixed on the small shoes visible behind her legs. You plan to use that on me? His voice was calm, almost too calm. Depends on your next sentence. One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. Nicholas Gabriel DeLuca, born October 14th, sleeps with a stuffed triceratops named General Thunder. Hates peas, loves astronomy, and tells everyone he's allergic to carrots because he doesn't like the texture. Behind Evie, Nico inhaled sharply. The stranger lowered his hands. His mother called him Nicky. I call him Nico because he told me Nicky sounded like a baby. Nico stepped out. Dad! Roman's control broke, so quietly most people would have missed it. His shoulders dropped. His breath left him. Then he crossed the distance and knelt, not caring that the wet pavement soaked through his trousers. Nico ran into him. Roman wrapped both arms around his son and closed his eyes, holding him with the desperation of a man who had spent hours imagining an empty future. Evie lowered the extinguisher. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she noticed how Roman's men kept scanning rooftops, exits, windows, and her. Roman finally looked up at her over Nico's shoulder. Gratitude softened nothing about his face, but it changed. The way he saw her. Not as a witness, not as a problem, as the person who had kept his child breathing. Evelyn Hart. He must have traced her badge from the photograph. Evie, her fingers tightened around the metal handle. And before you thank me, one of the men who took him may know your security system. Roman rose slowly, keeping one hand on Nico's back. We'll discuss everything somewhere safe. Nico reached for Evie before Roman could turn away. His small hand closed around hers. She comes to. Roman's gaze dropped to their joined fingers, then lifted to Evie's face. Something unreadable passed between them. She comes to. As the group moved toward the SUVs, Evie glanced at the nearest guard. Silver flashed beneath his cuff, a square-faced watch engraved with a tiny black crown. She had seen that same symbol through the clinic window. The man noticed her staring and quietly pulled his sleeve down. Evie memorized his face. Whoever had taken Nico might not have been outside Roman's security team. He might already be standing inside it. Evie said nothing about the silver watch during the drive. Nico sat between her and Roman in the rear seat. One hand locked around each of theirs, as if releasing either might make the night begin again. Across from them, the guard with the covered wrist stared through the windshield. Evie memorized his profile and waited. Accusing the wrong man inside a moving vehicle filled with Roman security team would be reckless. Staying alert was not. When the convoy entered the underground garage beneath a private medical facility, the guard stepped away before Roman's men began their security checks. By the time Evie looked for him again, he had disappeared. A pediatric physician examined Nico, while Roman remained close enough to intervene, but too far away to comfort him. Evie watched the boy answer questions in a flat, careful voice. His father could command every person in the building, yet he stood helpless beside the exam table. When the doctor confirmed Nico had no serious injuries, Roman led Evie into a quiet consultation room. Name what you need. He placed his phone on the table as though preparing to authorize a business deal. Money. A safer apartment. A position at any hospital in the city. Evie studied him. Do you always thank people by making them feel purchased? His expression tightened, though not with anger. I repay my debts. I didn't save your son to create one. Roman moved closer, his attention dropping briefly to the faint bruise forming on her wrist where the extinguisher handle had struck her during the escape. You risked your life for a child you didn't know. That's not extraordinary. That's what adults are supposed to do. Something changed behind his eyes. He was used to fear, greed, and carefully rehearsed gratitude. Evie offered none of them. Then tell me what you want. She glanced through the observation window. Nico sat alone on the exam bed, turning an unopened juice box between his hands. I want you to stop trying to pay me and go sit beside your son. Roman followed her gaze. He has doctors. He needs his father. The silence stretched. Evie expected resistance. Instead, Roman walked into the examination room, lowered himself beside Nico, and reached for the boy's shoelace. His large hands fumbled once before tying it properly. Nico leaned against his shoulder. Roman went still, then carefully wrapped an arm around him. Evie looked away before the tenderness of it could feel too private. Minutes later, Nico appeared in the doorway. Evie should eat dinner with us. Roman rose behind him. Miss Hart probably has plans. My plans involve instant noodles and falling asleep on my couch. Nico considered this. Our plans are better. Roman's gaze met hers, warmer now and faintly amused. He negotiates aggressively. I wonder where he learned that. The answer almost became a smile. Evie agreed to stay until Nico ate, but the moment they entered the private dining room, every light went dark. Security alarms died mid-tone. Roman moved in front of Nico while Evie reached for the boy's hand. Somewhere beyond the locked doors, footsteps approached through the darkness. Nico's voice trembled beside them. They found us again. Roman moved before the footsteps reached the door. One arm drew Nico behind him while the other guided Evie against the wall beside the dining room entrance, shielding both of them with his body. Stay with me. His voice remained controlled, but the hand at her waist was tense enough to reveal what his face refused to show. The emergency lights flickered on a second later. Luca Moretti entered first, followed by two guards carrying flashlights. No physical breach, but it wasn't a false alarm. Someone mirrored the security system for 47 seconds. Roman's jaw hardened. What did they see? The convoy route, this facility's layout, and the emergency relocation address. Nico's fingers tightened around Evie's hand. Whoever was watching them had not tried to enter. They had been waiting for Roman to show them where he planned to hide his son next. Nico still clung to Evie's hand. They know where we are. Evie crouched until they were eye level. They know a building. That doesn't mean they get to decide what happens inside it. His breathing slowed as she counted with him. For seconds in, for seconds out. Roman watched in silence, his attention fixed on the gentle way she steadied his son without making him feel weak. The medical facility was no longer secure, so Roman moved them to the DeLuca estate before midnight. The house was beautiful in the way museums were beautiful, expensive, guarded, and too quiet to feel lived in. Evie stopped just inside the foyer. How many people live here? 2. Roman handed his coat to a waiting staff member. Then why does it look like nobody does? Luca coughed into his fist. Roman gave him a look that ended the sound immediately. Nico refused to sleep unless Evie stayed nearby. Roman offered her a guest suite for the night, promising a driver would take her home at dawn. I stay on my terms. Evie folded her arms. No locked doors. No taking my phone. And I leave when I choose. Agreed. The answer came without hesitation. She had expected negotiation, maybe even offense. Instead, Roman entered the security code and pushed the guest room door open for her. When she stepped past him, his hand reached around her shoulder to switch on the lamp. The movement brought his chest close to her back. Heat pressed through the thin fabric of her scrubs, and her breath caught before she could hide it. Roman noticed. His gaze lowered to the side of her face. Then he deliberately stepped away. You'll be safe here. Evie turned, using humor to cover the sudden pull in her stomach. That would sound more reassuring if you didn't say it like a sentencing judge. Something almost human warmed his eyes. I'll practice. Outside the room, Nico appeared with a sheet of paper taped crookedly to the door. House rule: no leaving before breakfast. Roman looked at his son. You wrote that 5 minutes ago. It's still a rule. Evie smiled despite herself. Hours later, a frightened cry pulled her into the hallway. Nico stood barefoot beneath the dim lights, trapped inside an invisible nightmare. Roman was already there, but he remained several feet away, uncertainty holding him still. Evie touched his wrist. You don't have to fix it. Just stay. Together, they sat on a long sofa until Nico finally slept between them. Roman pulled a blanket over his son. Evie reached for the same corner. Their fingers touched beneath the fabric. Neither moved. Then Roman's thumb slowly brushed across her knuckles, and somewhere in the darkened house, a security camera turned toward them by itself. By 7 the next morning, Roman DeLuca had declared war on pancake batter. Evie found him in the kitchen wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, staring at a smoking skillet as if it had betrayed him personally. Nico sat at the island in dinosaur pajamas, watching the disaster with open fascination. Is breakfast supposed to be black? Evie took the spatula from Roman before the smoke alarm could answer. It's caramelized. It's evidence. Roman looked toward the ceiling as the alarm began to shriek. Within seconds, Luca Moretti rushed in with 2 security guards, one hand near his jacket. He stopped when he saw the pan. Threat contained. Evie held up the burned pancake. Barely. Roman silenced the alarm while Nico poured syrup over the ruined circle. I won't testify against my father. The laughter that followed felt strange inside the DeLuca house, as though the walls had forgotten how to carry it. Roman turned at the sound of Evie's voice and paused. In daylight, with his hair slightly disordered and flowered, dusting one shoulder, he looked less like a man feared across the city and more like someone who had missed too many ordinary mornings. Evie's smile softened before she could stop it. Roman caught the change. For one quiet second, neither looked away. Then Nico pushed a plate between them. You both need to eat. People make bad romantic decisions when they're hungry. Evie nearly dropped the fork. Roman's expression remained composed, though the tips of his ears darkened. Where did you hear that? Television. Luca studied the ceiling with heroic concentration. After breakfast, Roman offered Evie a car and driver. She insisted on taking the subway to the clinic. 10 minutes later, she found him standing beside her on the platform in a tailored coat, looking profoundly offended by a sticky patch on the floor. for guards lingered nearby in terrible disguises. Two held the same newspaper upside down. "What are you doing?" Evie glanced from Roman to his men, learning how normal people commute. Normal people don't bring a tactical book club. Roman followed her gaze. The guards quickly turned separate pages. They're subtle. One of them has been reading the weather page for 12 minutes. On the train, the crowd pushed Roman closer. His hand settled against the rail above Evie's shoulder, forming a barrier without touching her. Every turn brought them within inches. She caught the clean scent of his cologne, felt the warmth of him through her coat, and became painfully aware of his eyes resting on her mouth before lifting again. "You're staring," she murmured. Roman leaned closer so she could hear him over the tracks. "I'm observing." "That sounds worse." "It probably is." The train slowed. Evie smiled despite herself, then noticed a man near the connecting door holding his phone at chest height. The camera was aimed directly at them. Their eyes met. He lowered the device and stepped into the next car just before the doors closed. Roman's expression changed instantly. "Luca." The guards moved, but the stranger had already disappeared into the station crowd. Evie looked down at her own phone as a message from an unknown number appeared. It contained a photograph taken seconds earlier. Beneath it were 5 words: "She won't save him twice." Roman took the phone from Evie's hand without touching the screen. The photograph showed them standing too close on the train, his body angled protectively around hers. Beneath it, the threat glowed like a promise. "She won't save him twice. You're coming back to the estate." His voice went cold in the way it did when fear disguised itself as authority. Evie took the phone back. "I'm going to work. Someone is watching you. Then let them watch me do my job." The train doors opened. Roman stared at her for 1/10 second, then followed her onto the platform. He didn't argue again. That surprised her more than the threat. By 9, the clinic was full of children, worried parents, and 4 security guards failing badly at pretending they belonged there. Roman sat near reception in a dark suit, drawing the attention of every adult in the room and absolutely none of the children. A 6-year-old girl named Rosie approached him with a pink plastic crown. "You look grumpy." Roman looked at Evie for help. She folded her arms. "You run half the city. I'm sure you can survive royalty." Rosie placed the crown on his head. "Better." 10 minutes later, Roman joined a funding meeting wearing it. No one mentioned the crown. Evie had to bite the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing. During her break, she found him in the hallway studying a notice about the clinic's possible closure. "We're losing a major grant." Evie tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll find another." Roman glanced at the peeling paint and outdated equipment. "You shouldn't have to fight this hard to keep children healthy. Most good things require fighting." His gaze shifted to her. "You say that like experience." "I say it like someone who grew up learning that adults don't always stay." Something softened in him, but he didn't offer pity. That made her trust him more. Later, in the supply closet, both reached for the same box of gauze. Their hands touched. Roman didn't move closer until Evie lifted her eyes to his. The space between them narrowed slowly, leaving her every chance to step away. "Do you want me to move?" His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Her pulse changed. "Not yet." His gaze dropped to her mouth. The heat between them deepened, controlled but unmistakable. Then Roman's phone rang. Nico's face appeared on the screen. "Dad, where are you?" Roman closed his eyes. Evie laughed softly against his shoulder. "At the clinic." Nico narrowed his eyes. "With Evie?" "Yes." "Are you being normal?" Evie answered for him. "He's wearing a princess crown." Nico gasped. "Send proof." After the call, Roman promised the clinic would not close, but Evie caught his sleeve. "Don't buy my life for me." He held her gaze. "Then I'll invest without controlling it." That answer stayed with her. Near closing, she reviewed the clinic security footage. The man from a subway appeared outside 3 days earlier, speaking to someone partly hidden by the frame. Evie enlarged the image. The second man turned just enough for the camera to catch his face. It was the guard who had vanished from the underground garage. A square-faced silver watch flashed beneath his cuff, its black crown engraving clearly visible. Then another figure stepped into view and handed him an envelope. Roman went completely still. You know him? His jaw tightened. Victor Rains. He designed Nico's security system. At that exact moment, every camera in the clinic went black. The clinic went dark so completely that Evie heard Roman's breathing change before she felt his hand close around hers. Stay behind me. His other hand moved beneath his jacket, but the emergency lights returned before anyone entered. Luca's voice came through Roman's earpiece. No physical breach. They accessed the clinic's server remotely. Roman stared at the dead monitors. What did they take? Staff schedules, emergency contacts, and 48 hours of security footage. Evie's stomach tightened. Sienna's name, address, and phone number were all listed in her emergency file. Victor had not shut down the cameras simply to frighten them. He had used the darkness to learn who mattered to her. By closing time, the network had been isolated and every employee warned. Victor had already disappeared from his apartment, office, and known accounts. Over the next 12 days, Roman became a quiet fixture in Evie's life. He brought Nico to the clinic for follow-up visits, remembered exactly how she took her coffee, and learned that 2 discreet guards were more acceptable than 6 obvious ones. Evie joined them for dinner 3 times. Nico began sleeping through the night. Roman began smiling before remembering he was supposed to look intimidating. Neither adult called those evenings dates, although Nico kept a written count and strongly disagreed. On the 12th evening, Nico announced that he had chosen a restaurant. It's not a date, Roman clarified as their car stopped outside a small Italian place in Brooklyn. Nico climbed out first. Then why did you change your tie? Evie glanced at the dark blue silk. Roman narrowed his eyes at his son. Get inside. Halfway through dinner, Nico pulled several index cards from his pocket. Questions. Roman set down his fork. No, Nico continued anyway. Favorite color? Green, Evie answered. Roman watched her over his glass. Blue. Who apologizes first after an argument? Your father. Roman lifted one eyebrow. Apparently me. Nico turned over the final card. When are you going to kiss? Evie nearly inhaled her water. Roman calmly removed the card. The interview is over. Later, after Luca took Nico home, Roman walked Evie to her apartment. They stopped beneath the hallway light, close enough to feel the attraction neither could dismiss anymore. After Nico lost his mother, I decided loving him meant controlling every possible danger. Roman's gaze lowered. It didn't work. Evie reached for his hand. Fear doesn't mean you stop living. It means you choose carefully. His knuckle brushed gently along her jaw. I want to kiss you. Her pulse quickened, then asked properly. A faint smile touched his mouth. May I kiss you? Yes. The kiss began gently, then deepened when Evie rested her hand against his chest. Warm, deliberate, wanted. Roman pulled back before restraint disappeared completely and rested his forehead against hers. I've thought about that too much. I was beginning to notice. His phone vibrated. Luca's message erased the softness from his face. Victor's burner phone just connected near the restaurant. A second notification appeared on Evie's phone. It was a photograph of Nico leaving dinner less than an hour earlier. Beneath it were 4 words. Next time, he disappears. Roman read the message once, then looked toward Evie's apartment door as if calculating how quickly he could move her entire life behind reinforced glass. You're coming to the estate tonight. Evie slipped the phone into her coat pocket. Nico needs protection. I need information. You're part of the threat now. That doesn't make me part of your inventory. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the effort of holding fear in place. I'm trying to keep you alive, and I'm trying to keep living. The words landed harder than either expected. Roman turned away, one hand braced against the wall. For a man who could control rooms with silence, helplessness sat badly on him. Evie stepped closer, but didn't soften her boundary. I won't quit my job. I won't disappear into your house. And I won't let fear make every choice for me. Roman faced her again. Then tell me what protection looks like to you. The question changed everything. By morning, they had a plan. Evie would continue working. 2 discreet guards would rotate outside the clinic. She would carry a panic button and attend defensive training with Luca. Roman would not track her phone without permission. I'm accustomed to giving orders, he admitted as they stood outside the clinic. Evie adjusted the collar of his coat. I'm accustomed to ignoring them. His mouth shifted. Even noticed. Inside, workers were replacing the broken heating system. A new ultrasound machine stood in the pediatric wing, and the pharmacy shelves had been restocked. Evie turned slowly. Roman. The clinic received an anonymous donation. Anonymous donors don't usually arrive wearing Italian shoes and 4 security agents. He met her gaze without apology. I didn't buy your clinic. I funded a non-profit trust. You remain in control. She studied the paperwork. No hidden ownership. No name attached. Just enough support to keep every child treated regardless of income. He had finally understood. She didn't want to be rescued from her life. She wanted someone willing to stand beside it. That evening, Evie went to the estate by choice. Roman found her in the library, wearing one of his shirts over dark jeans because Nico had spilled juice on her blouse during dinner. His attention moved over her slowly, then returned to her eyes. That shirt looks better on you. Careful. That almost sounded charming. He closed the distance between them. May I try again? Evie caught his tie and drew him closer. You're improving. Their kiss began softly, but restraint didn't survive long. Roman's hands settled at her waist, warm and steady, never moving farther without invitation. When he paused, his forehead against hers, she answered the unspoken question by kissing him again. Are you sure? His voice had roughened. Yes. The library door closed. The rest of the night belonged only to them. At 6 the next morning, someone knocked. I know Evie's in there, Nico called. Her shoes are outside. Roman stared at the ceiling while Evie buried her laughter in his shoulder. When Roman opened the door, Nico was no longer smiling. He held a Crown Harbor shipping folder he had found on the desk downstairs. A black crown was printed across the front. Nico stared at the symbol, his face slowly losing color. I saw that before. He ran to his room and returned with a crayon drawing of a red warehouse, marked with the same black crown. That's where they kept me. Roman's face went still. The symbol belonged to one of his own companies. Roman recognized the black crown before Nico finished explaining. It belonged to Crown Harbor Logistics, a company his father had built decades earlier and Roman had spent years trying to turn legitimate. By 8 that morning, the warehouse was surrounded by Roman's private investigators and a trusted NYPD detective. Federal authorities had been notified, but Roman's attorneys wanted verified evidence before bringing them fully into the case. Evie stayed beside Nico in the command SUV until Roman returned with a sealed evidence bag. Inside lay a child's broken tracker, copies of Nico's school schedule, and medical forms stamped with the clinic's old billing code. They knew every appointment, Evie murmured. Her stomach tightened as she studied the signature at the bottom. This didn't come from your house. Someone accessed pediatric records. Roman's expression darkened. Can you identify who? Give me a computer. 20 minutes later, Evie traced the login to a clinic administrator named Marcia Bell, a quiet woman who had worked at the front desk for 6 years. Luca found regular deposits from a shell company connected to Victor. Marcia had sold him Nico's appointment schedule, copied the clinic's rear service key, and given it to Aaron Voss, the guard Evie had noticed wearing the silver watch. Aaron had been working inside Roman's security team for months. He disappeared immediately after Nico's rescue. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. Marcia had needed money and convinced herself that schedules and keys were harmless. Victor had understood that small compromises opened large doors. Roman stared through the windshield at the warehouse. People fear me enough to hide mistakes until they become disasters. Evie closed the laptop. Fear makes people obedient. It doesn't make them loyal. His eyes shifted toward her. No one else would have spoken so plainly, but she wasn't trying to wound him. She was asking him to see what power had cost. Inside the warehouse, the private investigators uncovered enough evidence for the NYPD detective to request an emergency federal task force. Victor had intended to force Roman into signing over Crown Harbor's shipping contracts, then use the company to move illegal goods through legitimate ports. Nico had been leveraged, not a target. That distinction offered little comfort. On the drive home, Roman remained silent, until Nico fell asleep against Evie's shoulder. "I'm leaving it," he finally revealed. "Everything my family still operates outside the law." Evie studied his profile. "Because of me?" No, his hand tightened on the steering wheel. "Because my son drew the place he was held with. Crayons. Because I built walls around him and left the doors open from the inside." At the estate, they stood alone in the library where their relationship had changed the night before. Roman looked less like a king there and more like a man choosing which parts of himself deserved to survive. "I don't need you to become someone else." Evie placed her palm over his heart. "I need you to choose who you want to be when no one is afraid to disagree with you." His hand covered hers. "And if that man still wants you, then he should probably kiss me before Nico schedules another interview." The tension in Roman's face broke. He leaned down, but his phone rang before their mouths met. Luca's voice came through sharp and controlled. "Victor made contact." Roman straightened. "Where is he?" "We don't know." But Sienna Park never arrived at the clinic. Evie's blood turned cold. A message appeared on her screen from Sienna's number. "Bring the warehouse evidence alone, or your friend doesn't come home." Evie read the message once and felt every instinct in her body turn cold. Roman reached for the phone, but she closed her hand around it. "She's my friend, and Victor knows that." His voice stayed low, controlled by force. "That's why you're not going alone." He said alone. "He also kidnapped my son." Evie held his gaze. "Then we make him believe me." 30 minutes later, Lucas secured a tracking device inside the heel of Evie's boot. A federal task force monitored the abandoned print shop after Victor's messages and the warehouse evidence established an active kidnapping case. Before Evie entered the car, Roman caught her hand. "I don't want to lose you." It was the first time he had admitted his fear without disguising it as an order. She pressed his palm against her chest, letting him feel the steady beat beneath it. "Then trust me." Roman kissed the center of her palm. "Ido." Inside the print shop, Sienna sat restrained beneath a hanging work light, frightened but alert. Victor stood behind her with a handgun lowered at his side. "The evidence." Evie placed the drive on a metal table. "Let her go." His smile held no warmth. "You're brave for a nurse." "Mostly. Tired." Evie studied Sienna's breathing, then made a decision. "She's having an allergic reaction." Victor frowned. "No, she isn't." Sienna understood immediately. She folded forward, dragging air into her lungs. Evie moved closer. "Her airway is closing. If she stops breathing, you lose your leverage." Victor swore and bent to examine her. Sienna slammed his wrist against the metal chair. The handcuff key slipped from his fingers and skidded across the floor. "Told you yoga would be useful," she gasped. Evie dropped, grabbed it, and unlocked one cuff. Victor raised his weapon, but the side door burst open. Roman entered with Luca and federal agents behind him. "Put it down." Victor looked from Roman to Evie. "You built an empire, and a nurse brought it to its knees." Roman's eyes remained on the weapon. "She reminded me what was worth protecting." Sienna drove her shoulder into Victor. The gun struck the concrete and slid beneath an abandoned printing press. As agents rushed forward, Victor shoved a rusted metal frame toward Evie. Roman pulled her back, turning his body between her and the falling structure. A jagged corner cut across his ribs before the frame crashed to the floor. Federal agents restrained Victor without firing a shot. Roman stood over him, one hand hidden beneath his jacket. Victor smiled through his defeat. "Go ahead. Show her what you really are." For one long moment, the room waited. The old Roman would have settled betrayal privately and ensured no court ever heard the details. Instead, he thought of the man Nico would one day become. Roman stepped back. Read him his rights. It was not mercy. It was his decision to stop passing violence from one generation to the next. Evie freed Sienna and held her tightly. When she turned, Roman was watching her from across the room. He didn't seize her or order her toward him. He simply opened his arms. Evie crossed the distance willingly. "You trusted me," she whispered against his chest. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "Good. You need practice." A quiet laugh left him. Then Evie felt warmth against her hand. She pulled back and saw blood spreading across his shirt. "Roman." He glanced. down as though noticing the injury for the first time. It's nothing. His knees nearly gave way before the sentence ended. Evie caught Roman before he hit the floor. Stay with me. Her hands moved automatically, pressing against the wound while Luca cleared the room and called for the medical team. Roman tried to sit up. Sienna, alive. Evie pushed him back down. Victor, in custody. His eyes searched the room. Nico, safe at home. Only then did some of the tension leave his face. Evie tore open his shirt enough to examine the injury. The cut along his ribs was deep but clean, caused by the jagged strip of metal that had torn loose when Victor struck the printing frame. It needed stitches, not a funeral. You're not dying. Roman's mouth shifted faintly. You sound disappointed. I'm deciding whether to save you before or after I yell at you. By the time the private medical room was ready, Roman had regained enough color to insist he could walk. Evie ignored him and made Luca bring a wheelchair. Roman stared at it like it had personally insulted the DeLuca name. Seat. Her tone left no room for negotiation. Luca looked away, hiding a smile as Roman obeyed. In the treatment room, Evie cleaned the wound while he washed her face instead of the needle. You should look somewhere else. I've seen worse. I meant because you're staring. I know. Heat touched her cheeks, but she kept her hands steady. When he flinched, Evie softened. For once, can you stop being responsible for everyone? Roman looked toward the ceiling. I don't know how. She set the instrument down and rested her palm against his chest. Start by letting me take care of you. His hand covered hers. The silence between them changed. No danger. No strategy. Just two people finally standing still long enough to admit what had been growing between them. I love you. Roman didn't hide behind power or gratitude. Not because you saved Nico. Not because you made the house feel alive. I love the way you challenge me. The way you laugh when everyone else is afraid to breathe, and the way you never confuse kindness with weakness. Evie's throat tightened, but she held his gaze. I love you, too, but I won't be the reward you get for becoming a better man. Roman shook his head. You're not a reward. His thumb moved across her knuckles. You're the person who gets to choose whether I deserve a place beside you. Before she could answer, the door opened. Nico walked in holding a paper bag. His eyes moved from Roman's bandage to their joined hands. Are you finished with the serious conversation? Evie smiled. What? Because I'm hungry, and Dad is banned from making pancakes. Roman exhaled something dangerously close to a laugh. Later, with Nico asleep beside him, Roman signed an immediate suspension order covering every illegal operation still tied to the DeLuca name. He authorized his attorneys to begin formal cooperation with federal investigators and started the process of transferring Crown Harbor into an independently audited trust. The organization would not be transformed in one night, but for the first time, Roman had chosen a direction from which he would not turn back. I can't promise I'll become perfect. Evie leaned against his shoulder. Good. Perfect people are exhausting. Weeks later, Roman invited her to the renovated clinic. The new pediatric wing glowed with fresh paint, donated equipment, and children's drawings. In the center of the lobby stood Nico in a tiny suit, holding a velvet ring box. Roman stopped beside him, suddenly less composed than Evie had ever seen him. Nico nudged his arm. Dad, this is the part where you kneel. Roman looked at Nico, then at the ring box in his son's hands. For a man who had faced boardrooms, threats, and federal investigators without blinking, he suddenly seemed uncertain of his own voice. Evie felt her heart soften before he even moved. Roman lowered himself onto one knee in the center of the clinic lobby. No guards surrounded him. No expensive speech waited in his pocket. Only Nico stood at his side, smiling so hard he could barely keep still. The night you texted me that my son was safe, I thought you had returned the most important thing in my life. Roman's eyes held hers. I was wrong. Evie's breath caught. You gave me something I had never known how to build. A home that wasn't. Made of locked doors, cameras, or people following orders. Nico opened the velvet box. Inside rested a simple diamond ring, elegant without being extravagant. Roman reached for Evie's hand, but paused before touching her, giving her the choice even now. She placed her fingers in his. I don't want you to belong to me. His thumb moved gently across her knuckles. I want to belong to a family that has you in it. Evelyn Hart, will you marry me? Nico tugged at Roman's sleeve. And be my family too? Evie looked down at him, her eyes filling despite her smile. Are you sure? Your father makes terrible pancakes. Nico sighed like a man carrying a difficult burden. I know, but we can train him. Laughter broke through the room. Evie cupped Nico's cheek, then looked back at Roman. Yes. Roman rose, and she barely had time to laugh before he pulled her into his arms. His kiss was warm, grateful, and full of a future neither of them had expected to find. 1 year later, they married in the garden behind the clinic. Sienna stood beside Evie, fully recovered and already crying before the ceremony began. Luca Moretti managed security, while wearing a pink flower Nico had personally pinned to his jacket. After a year of investigations, legal agreements, and internal restructuring, Roman had dismantled the last illegal arm of the DeLuca organization. Crown Harbor now operated as a legitimate company under independent audits and public oversight. He still carried authority when he entered a room, but he no longer mistook fear for respect. Evie continued working at the clinic, now expanded into a free pediatric care center for families who had nowhere else to go. She never became a decoration in Roman's world. She kept her career, her voice, and every boundary that had made him fall in love with her. Nico grew louder, happier, and increasingly convinced that he had personally invented romance. Sunday mornings became sacred. Roman attempted breakfast. Evie supervised. Nico kept a handwritten rule taped to the refrigerator, and no one leaves before pancakes. One evening, after the clinic closed, Evie sent Roman a message from upstairs. Your family is safe with me. His reply came. Immediately. Our family. Moments later, Roman entered the room, loosened his tie, and wrapped his arms around her while Nico laughed from the hallway because he had caught them kissing again. The house that once echoed with silence now held music, arguments about bedtime, burned breakfasts, and doors that no longer needed to be locked from the inside. Roman had spent years believing love meant protecting people from every possible danger. Evie taught him something harder and far more valuable. Love was not control. It was trust. It was listening. It was giving someone the freedom to leave and becoming the kind of person they chose to come home to.